Welcome to Lawyers in the House with Motley. Wish you had a lawyer in the family? Now you do. Here's your host, Veronica Waters.
Hello, friends. You heard the man. It is Lawyers in the House with Motley on WSB. And yes, I am Veronica Waters. Happy to have you back with us once again. Does anybody remember Magic Eye?
Yeah.
Anybody remember Magic Eye? I have these memories of walking through the mall back in the late 90s and coming across an airport kiosk where there would be these colorful, sort of splotchy, repetitively patterned pictures on display. And inevitably there would be like some people gathered around, and there's, they got the brow kind of scrunched in, the hands on the hips, they're kind of leaning in and like squinting at these photos. And while you got some smug friend on the side saying, no, cross your eyes or stand this way, come look over here or look, squint, and all this great advice that people are giving to until somebody says, oh my God, I see it. And so there were these, if you looked long enough at these Magic Eye pictures, you would see that there was an image hidden in there, like a wolf or a butterfly or a word. Honestly, I don't know what was in them because I could never. Actually, I've never to this day been able to see what's behind a Magic Eye photo. It's not so magic for me, okay? But anyway, today's Lawyers in the House with Motley show is actually going to talk about the similarity between those Magic Eye pictures and personal injury cases. And today we have got another solo dolo show with one of my favorite Motley injury attorneys. Welcome back to the house, Scott Patterson.
Thank you, Veronica. It's good to be here again.
I love being in here with you. And it's so funny because every time I talk, I see you giggling and I feel like I know I've done my job if I've amused Scott Patterson today.
It's a low bar. Easily amused.
So I think, honestly, have we ever done a show with you and somebody else?
No.
The other time was just a solo, too.
It was.
Listen, you guys are in for a magic ride.
Nobody likes to be in here with me.
Magic Eye, magic ride. Is that what it is?
Maybe. I don't know. I'm starting to wonder.
Please don't put me on with Scott.
Yeah, right.
So Scott Patterson, let's remind people who you are. Virginia native.
Yes.
Graduate of College of William and Mary.
Correct. Nice.
And Mercer Law School.
Yes.
Yes.
All
What
right.
led you to law so many years ago? What was I know Hollywood had something to do with it.
Yeah, weirdly enough, there was a L.A. Law was a show back in the day when I was quite young and used to watch it, and for something about it kind of intrigued me. And part of it too was I had tons of varied interests in trying to find a job where maybe you could kind of move within all of those various interests or plug into those. I kind of came to the conclusion that, one, I liked that show. It looked fun what they were doing on it and being in court and talking. And then, two, it really kind of gave you an opportunity to cover a lot of different interests. I mean, there's sports lawyers. I love sports. I like the environment. There's environmental lawyers. And it really seemed to be a vehicle to kind of, sort of find my passion and find a route that, opened a lot of doors.
So curious, how does real life compare to what you saw on LA Law? Is it what you thought it would be?
No. I mean, most of those shows, like 10% of it is what you might see. I mean, the courtroom stuff is, 10% of less of what you actually end up doing. A lot of cases don't ever make it to that point. When they do, some of it's accurate. I think Ally McBeal actually became a later show that a lawyer wrote that. So that sort of matched, but with a lot of drama added on to it. But yeah, it doesn't, reality doesn't always match.
Yeah, when I look at courtroom things on TV and the movies, I'm like, that would never happen. That never happens. What are they doing?
Yeah, my wife is a former prosecutor, so anytime they do kind of criminal things, she's like, wow, they really need someone advising on that because that's like so far off of what actually happens.
I think they just actually don't care. Like they're writing a story, they don't care what would actually happen, right? But
yeah.
I do remember hearing that My Cousin Vinny is so well done.
It is.
That you could actually, they have I think we've had some lawyers in here who said they studied it in law school. It was like an assignment.
Yeah, no, I mean, that actually was pretty accurate in terms of sort of what was admissible, how, sort of courtroom things can develop and
really,
move.
really good. Really,
Yeah.
really good. So quick question, personal question about Scott Patterson. Did you, because I know you did criminal defense law for a while, did you and your wife meet brawling over a case in court?
No, we met in law school, but, and so she then became a prosecutor and I worked at civil firms and then went out on my own. And part of what I did was criminal defense. So we we would be in and around each other, but we never had cases against each other. Yeah, I tended to stick to the non-violent things. She was on the felony side, on the prosecution side, so we didn't cross paths that often. But we conferred a lot on things. I would run stuff by her. She's like, yeah, that's never going to work. I've heard that argument a bunch of times from a defense attorney, and no, you're going to get shot down. I'm like, no, come on.
That's great, though, to be able to have that sort of brain trust in the household, you know? That's really wonderful.
Yeah, it is. It is. When it was. And I mean, it's, you know, we kind of have that at Montlick, too. I mean, we have, you know, the 40-plus attorneys, and, you know, they have vast levels of experience. And it's, you know, you've got an issue, you've got a problem that needs to be addressed, you got a question about a case. You know, you've got a brain trust right there in-house.
Yeah, but you've got a lot of experience yourself. You know, you've got a couple of decades under your belt at this point.
Yes.
Right? Husband, father, and now, watch out, David Montlick, because Scott Patterson just might be getting lured away by calling JV varsity. What is it? Is it varsity or JV?
Well, it's both.
It's both.
Yeah, I'm only supposed to be doing varsity, but I'm jumping in and helping on JV too.
So if you guys recognize this voice from the soccer pitch.
Right, yeah. If you ever in Marietta, you might hear it. It's funny, my dad lives behind the stadium, and he'll text me, he's like, are you announcing tonight? Because like when we score a goal, it gets pretty loud, and my voice kind of projects. So.
I think I hear Scott on the PA.
Yeah, he's like, sounds like, is that you tonight? Is there a game tonight? I'm like, yeah, that's me. And he's like, yeah, I thought I heard something.
That is very cool. Scott Patterson, thank you so much for being back in the house with the Lawyers in the House with Montlick on WSB. I'm Veronica Waters here. And started off the show talking about those magic eye pictures. You remember those?
Yes. Yeah, I'm old enough to remember.
Were you good enough to see them?
I got better, but yeah, initially it took a while, and then I realized you just sort of have to kind of relax your eyes and just kind of let it sort of come to you, I guess.
Kind of let it come to you. So what is the commonality between magic eye pictures and personal injury law? Well, sometimes a case is not the case that you thought it was when it walked in the door. Yes?
Yes, very much so. I mean, you know, we talked about this, you know, any auto accident case, there could be a products case involved. You think of a car, it's got thousands of moving parts and different components, and you know it may look like just a run-of-the-mill rear-end collision where you know you've got an injury and you kind of move forward, and you know a lawyer that's not paying attention and not looking at the details might miss that. You know, hey, something's out of place here. Like either you know the damage to this vehicle doesn't really match with the impact. You know what's going on, and it could very well be that a component failed. So it's you know, there's something below the surface, and you kind of have to know where to look and how to look to be able to try to uncover those types of cases and see that there's something else going on there.
How frequently would you say that there is a case sort of, maybe not hidden, but how often do you think there's a case within a case?
You know, I mean, if you take just the broad field of auto accident cases, I mean, out of those, how many times would you might have a product defect or, you know, sometimes it's a road defect. You know, I would say probably less than half of them are there or have some issue. And then you also got to look at, you know, the level of injury because of the cases, you know, if you do have a products case, if you had a road defect case, they become very expensive potentially to bring suit on. And if you have a very minor injury, then usually there's sufficient insurance just on the car accident side of it that, you know, even if there might be a slight product defect, it doesn't make really sense to pursue it. But, you know, you still have to look into all those issues. But I mean, I think, you know, far less than 50% of most accident cases have any sort of other component associated with it.
A lot of them look pretty straightforward, and they are, because they are.
Correct.
Yeah. Ever been surprised by one?
Well, I mean, I haven't really personally been overly surprised by ones that I've seen, but again, you've kind of, I've had one, actually a friend of mine dealt with this case, and he and I spoke about it. We were sharing office space at the time where the injury itself looked like kind of not a great injury. We had a good defendant with lots of money, so you were going to kind of pursue and look into it, but it looked like a very sort of mild shoulder injury, something that anyone would get, but you know, the attorney was astute enough to really investigate and dig into it and talk to his doctors and, more importantly, talk to his client and understand a lot from his client. And it turned out he had a kind of a rare injury, but a very serious injury that could ultimately result in like his arm going dead and basically being amputated would be sort of the worst case scenario of this. But it was through the lawyer understanding, talking to his client, being involved from the very early on, and that case turned into a very large settlement because, in talking to his client, talking to the doctor, jumping on the case, being involved, seeing that, hey, this isn't just a easy car wreck case, I'll just settle it for whatever's out there and move on, to discover that, hey, this was actually a very serious injury that led to a very good recovery for the client.
Imagine if you are a person with that injury that you don't know is like a ticking time bomb for the life of your arm, and you are with a firm that has an attorney that you've never talked to and a case manager you have to hunt down to get information from. Nobody's talking to you. Nobody's asking about your injuries, your feelings, your medical treatment, or anything.
Yeah, and that's the big danger is one of the things that we do at Montlick that's I think it's unique for a firm of our size is you're talking to an attorney from the first call, so you have an opportunity. One, you're talking to an attorney. Two, you're talking to invariably a very experienced attorney, right? Because that's what you get when you call Montlick. So it's important for them to be involved on the front end and to look into issue spot. It is with all these types of cases. I mean, a lot of these cases can be easily missed just because either one, you don't have an attorney involved early enough. You do just have a case manager, an intake person that's just told, we take car accident cases. Oh, it's a car accident case. Okay, I'll take it. And then 6 months later, an attorney might actually pick up the file and look at it and be like, either one, they may not know what they're looking at and still not catch it, or it's too late. Because a lot of these cases, for instance, if there's a products case, you got to make sure you keep the product.
Good point.
If the car disappears, you'll never know if there was a defect in it. You might see something in an accident report. You might see something in the pictures like this looks off. But if the car's gone, you can't really do anything about it. At that point, your client's lost, an opportunity to get the compensation they may deserve in a particular case.
What about if something happens when the patient is getting treated? Maybe it was not a products liability case. Maybe everything with the vehicle was fine and dandy and everything with the road was smooth and sure. But there's something that happens once they've started treatment. Can that happen?
Yeah, it can. And, that's so you can have what appears to be an auto accident case. Your client goes to the hospital, gets treated, but then something's not right about their recovery, or, they end up having to have a surgery because of the nature of the accident. And they're not recovering quite right. You may very well have a medical malpractice case involved there, but if you're not in touch with your client, if you're not following their treatment, if you're not corresponding with them, you may very well miss that, and then you've again missed getting full value for your client and their case.
It's incredible to think about how, once again, it really is like those magic eye pictures. You have to really look hard. You have to turn over every rock. You have to look behind every corner and lift every blanket or piece of paper. What do you lift in a law office? I don't know, whatever. But you know what I'm saying. You
Your
leave
mug.
no stone unturned. We'll just say we leave no stone unturned. Coming up on Lawyers in the House with Montlick, I'm talking to Montlick injury attorney Scott Patterson about what it means when the injuries don't quite line up. That is straight ahead. Stay with us. Welcome back to Lawyers in the House with Montlick on WSB. I'm Veronica Waters here with Montlick injury attorney Scott Patterson, talking about the cases that are hidden within cases. And we've already started to delve into how that might be an auto accident, might actually be not just a car crash, but it could also be a products liability claim. Or maybe you can have what seems like a minor arm injury and then find out this is really something catastrophic where you could lose your arm. And your lawyer is the one who helped you find that out by talking to the medical treatment. Next thing you know, you got a 7-figure settlement on your hands. Because you saved that arm.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about what it means, though, when the injuries don't line up. What's that all about?
It can mean a lot of different things. I mean, some of the examples that I've seen, there's a pretty serious car accident actually on the downtown connector. The passenger in the vehicle, hopefully people aren't freaked out by hearing it on the radio, but he was almost cut in half while wearing a seatbelt. And most folks may have just seen that as it's a car accident case. We know seatbelts cause injuries. Plenty of people have pretty severe bruising from it. And they may have thought, okay, that's that just can happen in this type of accident, the seriousness of an accident. And, what was able to be determined from that, though, is that the seatbelt had actually spooled out, and it wasn't supposed to. It's obviously supposed to lock.
It's supposed to
down.
lock and grip you.
Right, and you're supposed to kind of be close enough to it that it won't cause that type of injury. But what they determined was the seatbelt had spooled out so that his body came forward into the seatbelt, and the seatbelt just, kind of basically became a blade that sliced him. And again, if you're not paying attention to your case, if you don't have an attorney early on looking at those facts and kind of knowing like, hey, this something doesn't seem right here, that would have been missed. It would have just been, wow, that's a horrible injury, but yeah, this was a really bad accident. There was 4 or 5 or more cars involved, and you would have moved on. Like, okay, we'll settle the case and move on and not catch that and not understand and, not help the family, get full compensation for the fact that this was a young kid. He was coming back from a baseball tournament. And so, they lost a child, a teenager. But, thanks to paying attention and seeing that there was something else involved, it became a products case that ultimately went to trial. So.
It went to trial? You're kidding me.
Yeah, and it turned into quite an interesting drama. It ultimately settled, but it was an interesting case.
What? How? Okay, this is what I'm so sorry. I'm so shocked. Mm-hmm. How do you defend the fact that your product's seatbelt just went all loosey goosey?
Yeah, they're going to point fingers at someone else. They're going to say that's not the way it was designed. It must have been a maintenance issue or some other issue that wasn't. Ultimately the companies that were sued, they're always going to try to point fingers somewhere else. So a lot of these cases end up, going pretty far down the road, which a lot of times is a pretty sad state of affairs when they're not stepping up and taking responsibility. But that's kind of not why they're in business.
This is what it looks like when good lawyers step up and take responsibility, persevere, and get justice for a family. Coming up next on Lawyers in the House with Motley, Scott says fewer than 50% of these cases actually have cases hidden within them, but we are going to delve more deeply into getting you some of those stories so you can see up close and personal what it looks like. That's coming up next on Lawyers in the House with Motley on WSB. Hey, friends. Welcome back to The House. Lawyers in the House with Motley on WSB. I'm Veronica Waters here with Motley injury attorney Scott Patterson, who is giving us some wonderful stories today about the magic eyes of the personal injury world when you have a case hidden within a case, just like those photos from way back when, or those paintings or pictures or whatever they were from way back when that you would stare at. And when you looked at them hard enough and concentrated well enough, you could see something more was hidden there. If you missed any of these great stories that Scott dropped in the first half of the show, make sure you subscribe to us on your favorite platform where you get your podcasts. And so you can hear us and Scott talk about these magical moments and getting justice for clients when you really know how to leave no stone unturned and find a case within a case. It can make so much difference, Scott, in somebody's life going forward. It
really can. It really can. I mean, you're going to leave a lot to be desired if you don't pick up on these things, especially when the injuries are serious. And that's usually a key is, the injury is serious enough that, you've got to look and you've got to try and you've got to dig and make sure that you're getting full compensation for someone who's had a very tragic incident in their lives.
Exactly. Nobody asks for this.
No.
Nobody wants this. And I know, I think I've mentioned before on the show that you are you're a member of the Multi-Million-Dollar Advocates Forum, which means that you have consistently landed multi-million-dollar verdicts for your clients over the years. But what I always want to tell people, since it was sort of brought home to me, is that those multi-million-dollar verdicts often mean really horrific injuries or losses of life even.
Yeah, they do. They do, and that's sort of the other side of it. People see like, a big verdict going up like, oh, wow, that attorney's, doing well. But, behind 99.9% of those is a very, very sad story of someone losing a life, a loved one, losing, a life that they once had. They're still alive, but their life is vastly different than it was before the accident. So, that is the flip side of it. People get fixated, I think, on the money. and the big verdicts. But, again, there's almost always a very sad story behind there. But the nice thing about what we get to do is sort of, I wouldn't say bring joy to the moment, but, bring a sense of justice and a sense of, holding the right people accountable. And again, it's finding those people sometimes is the trick with the case, and finding the thing there that doesn't fit, but it is there, and you got to know how to look for it.
Yeah, you got to be a little bit of a Sherlock Holmes, I guess, sort of looking under every rock and tracking down every piece of evidence, figuring out every clue.
You do. You have to be have to be involved. You have to be engaged. And again, that's the beauty of hiring and calling Montlick is you have an attorney from the get-go. So you've already got a jump start on a lot of firms that don't have that same type of procedure.
Let's get back into the stories, Scott, because this fascinates me. Give us anything that jumps out at you. What's one special one what's a lot of special ones?
There's a lot of them out there. I think one, and honestly, I just came across it recently because I was able to meet the attorney that we worked with on this case. So, the other thing about, Montlick is our relationships with other attorneys and our co-counsel relationships. And, again, as we discussed, we'll roundtable things. Our attorneys are very experienced in-house, but then, there's things that are unique enough and things where, we can bring in other attorneys that have specialties in that area, and we work with them very closely, and we have absolutely fantastic relationships. And this particular case was one we had the pleasure of working with co-counsel on. It occurred up in Tennessee, but again, it looked like, a weather-related car accident. There was a pretty dense fog in the area, and it ended up in a multi-car collision, very serious injuries. We got involved. That's the nice thing, too, about Montlick. We are, a nationwide attorney. So, this is a case out of Tennessee, but, we're getting those, and we're able to handle those because of our relationships and our experience. So, we got involved, started looking into it, brought in co-counsel on it as well to begin looking at it. And, again, it would seem like a normal weather event. Like, oh, there was fog in the area. It's Tennessee. It's kind of near the mountains. Like, okay, that happens. And, it sucks, but it happens. And that, here's this car accident and that's it. Well, what ended up transpiring is, we started digging. We started looking. The attorney we had working with us did the same and determined that fog wasn't actually a weather-related fog, but that there was a nearby factory that had. And he started looking. He looked at the history of this site. There had been multiple fog-related accidents, but this fog would, I kind of liken it to like a Scooby-Doo episode where suddenly this magic fog appears and, out creeps a monster or whatever. But what he looked at is that this fog had caused multiple accidents in the past. And he started looking about what was around and what was in the area and determined that actually these were emissions from this nearby plant. And this turned into, what ultimately was an environmentally related issue of how they were handling their emissions, how they were handling retention ponds and things on the site, and ultimately led to quite a bit of change in how those things were handled by them. So you end up having this sort of almost Aaron Brockovich moment where you're what appeared to be a kind of a run-of-the-mill car accident case turns into this massive thing and this corporate responsibility case. And again, it was digging, looking, seeing things that didn't maybe quite match up, and then pursuing them. They ultimately had a fantastic recovery for the clients, and then ultimately for everybody else involved, because it helped cure an issue that was going on for years and years that had caused multiple other accidents, and no one had ever figured out why it was happening.
Made the area safer. You got recovery for the victims. And I remember that was huge. There was a documentary done on it, The Killer Fog, I think is what it was called, Killer Fog.
Yes.
And it the recovery was tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars. It was many millions of dollars, which came out of that. And so you solve this thing that, again, it really strikes me that it's something people would just take for granted. Oh, it's always foggy over here. Well, it shouldn't be. Here's why it is.
Right.
But you don't think anything. You're right, because you're driving through the mountains of Tennessee. You think, hey, this is no big deal. No, sometimes it's not just a nice foggy mountain fog.
Yeah, and a lot of attorneys would have just said it's a car wreck case. There's X amount of insurance available for us to pursue. Let's they would have settled it and moved on.
Yeah, that's incredible. Incredible job. Tell me about, you mentioned when we were in the break something about a family you worked with on sort of a heartbreaking case that had to do with a motorcycle rider.
So it's actually a case that is currently ongoing. Again, this appeared to be, a very tragic accident. Unfortunately, the person involved in the accident is deceased, involving a motorcycle. But again, it looked like, this person pulled out in front of them. It was an accident. Unfortunately, he passed. But in talking to the family more, you start looking at scene photos, and then, ultimately, there's a death certificate that, it's one of those injuries don't match. I mean, you've got what is listed as a very serious head injury, yet there's a helmet involved. So you're like, why is there such a bad injury if he's wearing a helmet? And then, as we've dug into it, there's some questions about the helmet itself, whether it was on at the time. And those are all things that we're pursuing. But again, it's a case where, you could have just seen it as a car accident case, a very tragic one, settled it for whatever insurance was available on the vehicles and moved on from it. But, we're still digging and believe there might be something more to that.
Well, keep us apprised of how it plays out. This is going to be fascinating. That's going to be Scott Patterson's solo show number 3, maybe. Well, you know what? I know these things can take a long time, though. They don't just happen overnight. So you might have done several more shows by the time.
Maybe true.
Yeah. What about, you mentioned earlier something in the show about how things can be wrong with the road. Do you have anything top of mind there?
So, there's a lot of issues there. I actually had a case quite a few years ago that we were looking into. And again, it looked like just our driver had not been paying attention and basically drove into back of it was late at night. It was out on 285 and drove into the back of a truck that was actually driving sort of in the median and cleaning the storm drains.
Okay.
And again, it looked like driver error. A lot of people wouldn't take that case. He appears to be at fault.
Right, you drove into the back of the guy.
Yeah. But again, things aren't as they appear, and we started digging into it, and what we started looking at and determining was that it appeared that how they were operating out there that night wasn't in compliance with DOT regulations. They have to create what's called a moving taper, and it didn't appear that they were doing that correctly, which, ultimately the whole reason for that is to give people fair warning and enough time to avoid the collision that happened. So, everything in place, all the rules, all the regs were supposed to prevent that type of accident. Unfortunately, the firm I was working with on that case, I moved on before I ever found out what happened with it. But again, it was, a lot of folks would have taken that case. Again, it just like somebody maybe not paying attention.
What was it that triggered something in your brain that said, I need to look more closely at this?
A lot of it was just knowing, we spoke to the family. Unfortunately, again, that driver was deceased because of it. So again, you have a serious injury, so your curiosity is going to be piqued a little bit there. And the family actually knew one of the attorneys at our firm, and that type of accident didn't match with who this person was. He was a former sheriff, was a very skilled driver. Again, things weren't looking right. Like, this is not behavior you would expect from him.
Like your spidey senses were.
Yeah, and then there was also a potential seatbelt issue related to that because he was an adamant seatbelt wearer, but at the time when they found him, his truck unfortunately rolled and hit another structure, and he didn't have the seatbelt wasn't on him anymore. But everyone that knew him was like, that doesn't seem right either. So again, that was another thing we were looking at is like, did that seatbelt detach? Was there an issue there? And did that ultimately cause the type of injuries that he suffered? Would he survived otherwise? So that one had a couple pieces and things into it. But again, it's just things that don't seem to fit. You've got to explore those and you've got to look into them. You can't just sort of dismiss them and move on.
Did you know from the first call?
Yeah, the way that one came to me as the partner did. The partner who was friends with the family,
guy, yeah.
He immediately said, I know that guy. This doesn't sound right. He did what? He single vehicle accident crashing. No, that doesn't sound right. And again, we were on it immediately and pursuing it. So
relationships matter, skill matters, the brain trust matters, being able to brainstorm matters. What about simple things like asking the right questions?
Yeah, it's key, and you have to have, the experience to be able to ask some of those questions. Some of it comes with time, but some of it also comes with just being curious. I mean, that's kind of, what our job is. A lot of it is, we are part-time investigators in every case that we're involved in, along with advocates and attorneys. And you've got to have the drive, you got to have the passion. And again, that's the really nice thing about Montlick is that's the types of attorneys that work there. That's the type of attorney that we hire, are ones that have a passion for it and have a curiosity and, are not going to leave any stone unturned. They're going to look into everything.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I'm just going to make a quick confession here. One of the most fascinating things to me about meeting all of you at the firm, these 40 plus attorneys, and talking to you about the stuff that you do is that so often I've seen these stories. I've seen these headline making accidents or incidents or documentaries, and I had no idea Montlick was the firm that took that incident, brought justice to a family, or in the case of the Killer Fogg family, helped bring justice to dozens and dozens of people in a real way that helps them not only get whole again, but move forward with some peace of mind. Congratulations to you guys on that. Yeah. Coming up next on Lawyers in the House with Montlick on WSB, you know what it is. The MCA is on the way. Don't you miss it. Welcome back into the house, Lawyers in the House with Montlick on WSB. I'm Veronica Waters here with one of your favorite Montlick injury attorneys and mine, Scott Patterson. Don't forget to check us out on all platforms social at Montlick Law. And remember, you can log on and see our smiling faces and get a replay of this show on YouTube as soon as the episode drops. So you've been waiting for it the whole time we've been in here. Scott Patterson, it's time for the Montlick closing argument. Scott, make your case.
So basically what you have to do is, one, choose a lawyer that's fit for the job. And when you call Montlick, you're going to get one of those. And, as a client, ask the right questions. Be involved in your case. And the nice thing, again, about Montlick is that we have consistent client contact. We're talking to our clients. We're understanding what's going on with their treatment. We're understanding what's going on with their lives. And again, they're going to talk to an attorney from the very first call. But it is key to ask the client to share as much detail as possible. The case that we have pending that we were talking about with the possible helmet issue. Mm-hmm. The client mentioned, like, I have the helmet. It led to a series of questions of, one, how'd you get it and where was it? And it was away from the accident. So again, that piqued the curiosity of, okay, at some point it wasn't on.
So it wasn't
the driver
even. It wasn't on the rider, and it was.
Yeah, at some point it wasn't, and that's all the things that we were looking into. But again, it's taking that and then understanding from it, because some people be like, oh, okay, you have the helmet. Moving on. But, again, it was like, wait a second, you have it. Let me see it. Let me look at it. Let's look into this further. And that's what's led us down to the path that we're currently on, where we think there might have been an issue with the helmet. So, again, it's, when you hire the right attorney, you're going to get the attorney that asks the right questions. You're going to get the attorney that digs, that looks, that understands, and then has the experience and knowledge to ask the right questions, to go down the right paths. But, every case is certainly not as it appears. Some are fine, and it's a car accident case. It settles and it moves on. But some aren't. Some need to be looked into, because ultimately it's important that you do so to make sure that the client, again, gets what they deserve, gets some sense of justice, some sense of resolution, and it's the resolution that that they should get.
I think it would feel empowering for me to, as a client, to make sure that I shared everything possible with you and did my part to sort of help you, because I just keep thinking somebody could have had that helmet and said, this is too painful for me to hold on to. Let me get rid of it. I don't ever want to see it again. Take that car away. I don't want to. It's a reminder of this horrible pain I'm in. And, maybe those quick decisions are not exactly the way to go.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you so much to attorney Scott Patterson. So happy to have you back in the house with me, Scott. I'm already ready for our next show.
I know. Thank you. It's been a joy, as always.
Yeah, I love it. And you can catch Scott at a soccer pitch near you while soccer season is underway. Thanks so much for joining us, friends, for another episode of Lawyers in the House with Motley. Sometimes a case is hidden within a case. And don't you want an attorney who has the magic eye, who can help guide you to justice and a great settlement to make you whole again? I'm Veronica Waters. We'll see you next time.